today I'm giving you a little bit of a Reiners of Rohan look, but that's okay because we're going to be talking about the one and only Dr. Angela Davis. First, I want to talk about Our Prisons Obsolete, which was written in 2003 and has become only more relevant. This is truly just an impeccable and accessible resource. Even if you're somewhat familiar with critiques of the prison industrial complex and how it's an extension of slavery, I still found it incredibly helpful for giving like really concrete definitions as well as like significant events. Even though this is such a small little book, her writing is so expansive. It includes so much information, yet it is just so concise. It's honestly remarkable. She notes in particular that she is following specifically the ways in which the prison system is intricately and inherently tied to Blackness in the United States. However, she does discuss a lot about how Latinx people are affected by the prison industrial complex, as well as how any like brown people, anyone who's just like assumed to be Muslim, was criminalized post 9/11 and how that led to increases in incarceration, as well as she makes very clear that the prison industrial complex are an inherent part of settler colonialism. I ended up reading this book at the same time as I was watching The 13th, the documentary by Ava DuVernay, which is on Netflix, and I highly recommend that if you've been meaning to rewatch it or if you also hadn't watched it yet, because the documentary did a really fantastic job of giving like a broader scope to provide like the wider context which the book is situated within. The whole book was fantastic, but there are a few things that kind of stood out to me. One of them was she begins with discussing the ways that the media has played a huge part in naturalizing our understanding of prison and the alleged need for prison systems. And it made me think a lot about how I went through a phase where I watched a lot of like, what was that channel? Like A&E prison related content. The way that procedurals are also really complicit in this. The chapter that she did on gender specifically, like even though it's present throughout the whole book, there was one that was dedicated to it, which is how gender structures the prison system, which I highlighted just the whole chapter because it was exquisite. The only thing that this book really doesn't touch on is the incarceration of trans people, and that's not at all because Angela Davis is like transphobic or any way that I know of. In fact, there's been a quote circulating that I'll put here where she actually links the gender binary to a larger project of prison abolition in like a really beautiful way, but it's just not covered in the book. So, you know, I mean, one source and something I was also watching at the same time as this was Disclosure, which is another documentary on Netflix. Although it doesn't touch specifically on like the prison system, it does give context for the way that trans people have and continue to be criminalized. But I'll leave some other more specific like articles that cover this as well down below. While we're at it, I'm just gonna recommend one more documentary, and that's particularly if you are in Canada. It's on the CBC and it's The Skin We're In by Desmond Cole. He released a book recently of the same name wherein she documented a year in dealing with racism and police brutality in Canada. And then we have If They Come For You in the Morning, Voices of Resistance. This one was first published by The Third Press in 1971, and then it was republished by Verso in 2016 as a part of their Radical Thinker series. It was edited by Angela Davis and Bettina Apotheker. The title of the book comes from a part of a letter that James Baldwin wrote to Angela Davis. We must fight for your life as though it were our own, which it is, and render impassable with our bodies the corridor to the gas chamber. For if they take you in the morning, they will be coming for us that night. This was compiled and written and published while she was in prison and on trial. So it is very much of the moment. It is an anthology and it includes a lot of writing from Angela herself, but there are many other contributors, including other Black Panthers, particularly those who had or were currently imprisoned, as well as other inmates who were organized and resisting from within. So that included essays, letters between her and other prisoners, as well as poetry and court transcripts. It helped me a lot as well in terms of learning more about the civil rights movement in general, but like more specifically about the Black Panther Party. There's a lot going on in the book, but there are a few like major themes that seem to come through. One of them was about their articulation that they are political prisoners, which is important because in the United States as well as Canada, there is no specific political prisoner designation, which is why you saw so many of these like completely fabricated charges, like especially with Angela Davis herself, as a excuse to imprison revolutionaries. There was also a section where the United Committee to Free Angela Davis and All Political Prisoners wrote a political biography of Angela Davis, which I thought was really interesting because although I knew like some stuff about her in a general familiarity, I had no idea that she had like lived and studied that much abroad, or about all the stuff that happened with like Reagan as the governor of California trying to remove her from her position as a professor. There's also a lot of really nuanced discussion about how prison reform ends up being more punitive in the long run. There is also so much about the rise of fascism under Nixon and Reagan upcoming, which is so deeply relevant. Something else that I want to talk about, which is deeply relevant, and that is how we, particularly my fellow white people, can continuously support Black Lives Matter, efforts to defund the police, prison abolition, all of it. One thing that I think is really important is to be really tapped in at what's going on with your local government, okay, municipal government, whatever that is for you, because that's where a lot of stuff is happening, especially in terms of like police budgets, right? This is where a lot of the vote, the discourse, the open forums, like that is where that's going to be happening. So for instance, has there been motions brought forward to deal with carding and street checks, sending emails, calling your city councilors, or again, whatever the equivalent is in terms of input on those motions or pressuring to put motions forward. Another thing that my city did, I couldn't attend unfortunately, but they held a outside distance legal observer training, which is really important. Legal observers can play a really important role at different kinds of protests. Another thing is thinking about whether or not you have a plan that is appropriate and informed by what particularly Black people and Black activists have shared about what you're gonna do if you see a situation of potential or what is police brutality and intimidation or harassment. Do you know your rights and what you can say around if you're filming a situation? The other thing is that there's ongoing protests still happening all over the place. Just be aware that all of these kinds of actions require many different roles, including donations, dropping off like water and other kinds of supplies. Another thing is making a financial strategy for long-term donations in terms of what's sustainable for your own budget, and even if it's not monetary, like your time, how much of that can you afford to donate? A small point about the anti-racist TBR moment that a lot of white booktubers had. This is something that was addressed by Books by Lanus, okay, the one and only, made a video about how she was very justifiably worried that the white booktubers making all of these anti-racist TBRs was going to become a trend and not an understanding of a long-term sustainable change that needed to be made in terms of reading and content that was produced. Supporting Black writing in all forms is always so important, right? In terms of what you're reading, the publishers you're supporting, who you're discussing on your channel and giving like space and time and support to, like all that stuff is so important for your own learning, for then how that changes how you interact with the people around you. All of that stuff, so vital. But at a certain point, reading without action is just reading, okay? And I just wanted to make that point because although, you know, the space that we exist in on the internet is books, we're also people in the world who need to like be doing more and be accountable. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye!